Hi.
So, Cameron's meeting?
Sure.
Sorry, Ben, can you repeat that?
I don't know who's running the meeting.
Yep, it's in the agenda, so I'll be driving the moderation part at least, and Cameron can provide some timeline details, given that he was part of the incident report original. I'm just giving some time for everyone to join because we have a large audience. That's why we are not starting right away. All right, I think 1 minute past the scheduled time. We are ready to start. I'll be driving this meeting, like I said earlier. I'll just give you a short, very short expectation setting so that everyone knows what to see in the next 25 minutes. Sorry, I'm getting distracted by Zoom chat pings. All right, so the goal, as with any RCA, is making sure that we understand what happened and what we can improve. We're not going to be pointing fingers to any of the teams or people that were participating in this. The only goal is how do we make sure that we don't ever see this again. I'm not going to read the whole timeline. The timeline is there for async. So I want to make sure that we have enough time for discussion points. So I'll first hand it over to Cameron to see whether he wants to specifically point out anything from the timeline or the incident reports before I open up for discussion. Cameron.
So from my perspective, I don't have a lot of great insight into this particular issue. I was the EOC, the engineer on call, but from my perspective, I received basically an alert shortly after a deployment. I think it was Stan who had a really good insight. He connected the dots as far as to what the actual problem was. So I'm not going to go into any more than that, I guess, but I may not be able to answer some of the specific questions underlying why the deployment had failed or what changes were made to alleviate the problem.
Cool. All right. I think we should start with the discussion points right away, unless there is something more to add prior. I don't see or hear anyone raising their hands, so let's start with the discussion. Let's start from the development side of things. How was the change that contributed to this problem tested during development? I see
I can take that, yes.
Yeah.
I'll take
awesome.
that. So I was the original author of the change. I don't have the full insight into how all these things tie together in the end. I think I have a vague idea of what happened. Because also in the summary, it says the intention initially was a refactor around load balancing. I think it was one of these things where a lot of unfortunate events ended up tying together. And it wasn't strictly related to load balancing, So just to put it in one sentence, what we had wanted to do was to provide an API to allow the Rails app to identify itself as Sidekick or the Rails web app, etc. So it was merely just meant as a refactoring, basically. And the load balancing code, which I believe only executes as part of EE installations. That's the bits I'm really fuzzy on. That was affected by this. So and that's where it then tied into this change where a certain runtime should have identified itself. In this case, Sidekick should have identified itself as Sidekick, but it did not identify itself as Sidekick, which then led to a code path being triggered that was not meant to be triggered. And that then led to all kind of weird errors that kind of looked nonsensical at first. And that's where Stan stepped in and he kind of connect these dots. Yeah, so specifically to the point, so how was the change confirmed? So I do remember struggling a bit. So I did all my testing on the GDK, so against like local instances that we ran for Puma, Unicorn, and Sidekick. So what I did not do, because I remember struggling with this, was to test the change like on my local development environment in an Omnibus container. So I think what I tried doing was mounting my Rails app into the container, and that unleashed all sorts of chaos because it started to overwrite my local config files and then mess up my GDK config. So I eventually gave up, and I didn't really test that properly. Yeah, so I think that was part of the problem, that it was not really tested against Omnibus, and it specifically broke under Omnibus because Sidekick, so part of this check to identify for the runtime to identify itself, that kind of snuck into what should have just been a refactor. Maybe I can talk about this later, but was to also test the script path for the current component that runs. And we tested for a specific script name that should execute for Sidekick, which worked on, when we tested locally against the GDK. But apparently these scripts names change in Omnibus. So that's kind of where it started to break. And that was slipped past us during development.
Matthias, I'll just ask you a question because you're mentioning Omnibus. Mm-hmm. Inside of our pipelines, we have the package and QA item or jobs that will create the Omnibus package out of your changes and execute QA against it. Was this considered at some point? It's not obligatory, obviously, but
yeah, I might have not considered. This was like one of the first bigger stories I work on as well, so I'm still kind of like learning the ropes or whatever you call it. So I might have not considered that. I also, yeah, I'm not sure. Would that run like Sidekick alongside the Rails app server as well, or does it just start a Rails instance?
It installs the full Omnibus package, and
okay. Yeah.
And then it builds a package, and then it boots up a Docker image, as far as I remember, as well, and then does an automatic QA. Whether it would catch an issue, whether that would catch an issue with load balancing, I'm not really 100% sure, because probably not, because that's not the default, and we run only with defaults. But it would at least fail on the Sidekick B check.
Yeah. I suspect I did not look at that. Yeah, but yeah, thanks for the point. That's a really good point. I think you're right in that it might not have caught it, because I think this particular code path that was affected required a particular license, but this is the bit I'm a bit fuzzy on. I think it was something EE specific at least, so I'm not sure if that's.
I believe you're right.
If it's, yeah, we need to confirm that, but as far as I remember, unless it's in one of the higher tiers, if it's in starter, then it's behaving like a normal core, I think. But if it's one of the higher tiers that we have, then you actually need a license to test it.
We have one engineering product engineer on the call. Maybe can you confirm that package and QA runs EE?
I see head nodding.
Yeah, I think it runs EE. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's unclear which tier, I guess, and different tiers unlock different features, and I think load balancing is one of them. Okay. So are there any points that we want to discuss here? I think it's kind of clear how this went through. It was not obvious. Number one, it was not obvious how this works within Omnibus. Number two, there was no testing in packaging QA step in the pipelines. And then we went all the way to staging where it actually encountered the first EE instance. All right, let's go on to the next one. Was there any planning done in the requirement issue? Test planning, I mean.
No, not really. That was another point that, yeah, this ticket definitely fell short of. We should have done that earlier. We kind of, yeah, went into this head first, I guess, because it wasn't super well groomed. And I think we just, like, as we went along, looked at how could we solve this problem. And I do remember looking at, yeah, I think I added it here. So I do remember looking at, we were thinking, well, this sounds like, you know, someone probably solved that problem before. So we looked at the New Relic client library. So we looked at how they do it, and they were actually doing the same kind of checks. So they were testing for this scikit script bin path. And I guess we kind of, yeah, put too much confidence in that and kind of assumed, well, if it works for New Relic, it's going to work for us, which is not a good conclusion to come to, of course. But I guess that's another learning for us, that we kind of put too much confidence in that. So yeah, I think like on our end, we need to make sure that we plan the testing for this a bit better going forward. Like think about what could be the potential cases under which it might break under different environments and so forth.
It's Mac here. So not to point fingers at anybody, but did we consider using the feature proposal template? Because that template has a specific section for test planning. And if not, was it because this is a backlog tech debt refactor, which we use free-form issue format? Just want to understand how can we facilitate raising these test planning requirements earlier on?
Yes, exactly. You already mentioned it. It was precisely the reason that it wasn't meant to be a refactor only. So it was not meant to actually change any semantics. We just wanted, we had a lot of dispersed checks throughout the code base that would check for like class presence, for instance, of certain classes like the scikit class or a unicorn worker class. And we just meant to move this behind a facade, kind of a simple API. So part of the problem was that during the refactor, a couple well-intentioned suggestions were made for how to make this more solid, quote unquote. And that's kind of when I think we started to sneak like these super subtle semantic changes into it that didn't quite make it a refactor anymore. But initially, yes, like you said, it was in intention as just a refactor. So we didn't use a feature proposal. That's why, yeah, we kind of underestimated that change.
Okay.
The blast radius of this, for sure.
Okay, I do want to highlight that we do have a refactor template now. And I think
that's great to know.
As part of quality, I think I'll be signal boosting this so teams can use this, because if you look at the refactoring template, it's actually more aimed to testing than the feature delivery template, because there's like sections for like what's the blast radius, what are the intended side effects, what are the test levels that need to be considered, including starting from the unit tests. So I think this is one of the improvements that we can do, is make it broadly communicated through engineering. Hey, if you're doing refactor, please use the refactor template.
Yeah,
and then we can plug in.
That's great to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, and refactor templates, I think we should make package and QA like more of a mandatory thing. Like, if you are doing refactor, please ensure that we are testing everything that we didn't intended to miss, right? So thanks for facilitating the discussions. Matt, I want to give you kudos. I think you are being very humble and transparent, given you the engineer that worked on this. Like, thank you for all the insights.
Sure, of course. Thank you.
Back to you, Mary.
Yeah, so I think that brings me to the next question. How come was this not caught by unit integration testing? I specifically want to highlight, like in the merge request, we say in availability and testing section that this was impossible to feature flag. This is how we usually kind of gate these big changes and try to control the impact. There is a mention that semantics shouldn't have changed. The checks just moved behind the interface. So yeah, could you tell us a bit more, or not you, anyone actually who participated in this? I see there are other reviewers as well.
Okay.
How come?
Yeah.
Didn't
Maybe I
get,
can just quickly give my point of view, and then yeah, please someone else add to this as well. So yeah, I already mentioned it was meant as a refactor, and that we did that some changes to semantics kind of snuck in, I guess, went unnoticed, or like it wasn't really called out, and we should have probably thought, you know, we should have been more rigorous about saying if there is a change, maybe let's make that a separate MR, you know, make sure that this is purely a refactor. So that's like one aspect. And the other one was, oh yeah, feature flagging it. So this change, I really don't know how we would have done this, because it touches like, well, not the entire code base, but it was used in completely disconnected part across the code base. Like whenever we need a, like environment specific check, like am I running as Sidekick, or am I running as a app server, and so forth? Am I executing as a multi-thread environment? All these things, I would have, you know, you would have had to feature flag every single call basically. I guess it's possible, but it would have been very, very noisy.
yeah, and it's not, yeah, feature flagging is not the solution in that case. That is for sure. Like more confidence in testing definitely is then needed, or tests confirming or denying whatever you were doing there. Okay. Does anyone want to add anything more about unit testing and integration testing?
Yeah, I'll add just one little piece about that. If we had realized that we were making a serious fundamental change rather than a refactor, we could have put a little feature flag right in the extracted class, but you know, it didn't come to mind at the time.
Yes, exactly. That's an excellent point. Yeah.
Mike, can you say that again? The abstracted class?
Yeah, the class that we, the runtime class that we created as part of the refactor. Sorry, I don't know if you can hear me very well. That was just a refactor, but we could have introduced the feature flag just in that method internal to the class. Yeah, that's all I wanted to mention about that.
Cool, awesome, thank you. All right, to the next point. We passed all the tests, we packaged up, and deployment went out to staging. How come did the errors go unnoticed in staging? Matthias, you have items, so I'll call you out here. Do you want to speak up?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, again, speaking of the series of unfortunate events, I guess, so what I did was I went to Kibana, looked at the pre-prod logs where staging log items appear. And I guess what I was expecting at this point was to see, so at this time, I think we meanwhile pushed another change that actually removes these log lines. But at the time, we were using the application logger to emit like a one-liner, which would print out the runtime as it had been identified by this new class to the logs. So it would say something like runtime detected Sidekick, runtime detected Puma, and so forth. So what I looked at was, I just verified, do I see these log lines? Do they make sense in the sense that they cover these cases that I had? And I was seeing them. It's just like, there was not enough, because again, there were like certain cases under certain deployments, EE specific, where this led to errors. And what I should have done as well is do the opposite check. Is anything that I'm not expecting to break is actually breaking? Because I only saw basically the fraction of it working that did work, but I didn't see the fraction of it failing that did fail. So I guess I wasn't thorough enough there. I should have looked at Sentry as well, because these errors did show up in Sentry. We already checked that after the fact.
Mike, you have the next item.
Yes, before I start on the next, oh, Mike or Mac? Mike.
Mike has the next one. No worries.
This is just an idea, and I don't know, because it depends on the details of how we do deployments. But you know, if you look at the timeline, there's only like a few hours between staging deployment and production deployment, a couple hours. If we could lengthen that time without reducing the rate of deployment, that could be helpful for allowing people to come in and catch things.
So my question to you would be, I mean, obviously hindsight 2020, right? But would you actually log into staging, knowing that this is going out, and purposely go to Sentry to check for this?
No. Yeah, that's not. I'm not sure that I know exactly how it would be caught, but perhaps it would increase the likelihood. I'm not sure.
So that was one of the points I have a bit below, and that is that staging has limited set of eyes on it. The only thing we depend on staging is automation. So we have QA tests running automatically after every deployment, and when they pass, only then we progress further to other environments. Anything that is in between, anything that is not a failing test, it becomes secondary, right? Like we depend on manual action, and that is not reliable. We don't catch that.
I have a question about this. Could we, this might be hard to do, I don't know, because I'm not super familiar with the tooling here yet, but could we extend this to Sentry checks? Because I think Sentry has this notion of an error that has never occurred before. So I'm wondering if suddenly an error fires on Sentry purely on staging that has never seen before on any of the environments, if there's any way to hook into that and stop staging from being deployed further.
Yeah, that's a great point. We've very quickly looked into it. Like we should look into that more in depth, like absolutely, and that is an action item for my team. One of the issues with Sentry is that after every deployment, it reports even the old items as new ones for some reason. I don't know exactly what is the specific reason, but if you go to Sentry and you go to the releases part, select any of the SHAs, you'll see a lot of errors that are literally exactly the same, just a minor difference in how it was reported in Sentry, and we cannot halt everything because of it. But that's an action item for sure that we should investigate. Mac, your items are next.
Thank you. So being fully transparent here, this failure was raised in staging. I believe 3 of our tests, not in the smoke test suite, caught it. I think that all 3 test some fundamental aspect of CI, hence it's either failing at the start of the test, the middle, or sometimes at the end. We failed to escalate this to the delivery team. We do have a triage rotation, which is soon to be called the on-call now from the quality department. The reasons are down below because one of the person on rotation was ill for half the day and another person was doing lunch. Not an excuse, because we need to make sure the deployment is crisp. So we'll be looking into improvements using PagerDuty and make sure we triage staging and production first, because that unblocks the delivery team. And nightlies and master will come later. I believe the compass wasn't there, so now we do have a set priority of what to triage first. And my other if you're okay, I'm going to include mine at the bottom as well. So as part of the testing discussion, I think an easy flag would be if we use the refactor template, discussions will happen, and an easy change would be if you know this is a significant refactor, like everybody working on it should be monitoring the test results when their changes hit staging. And maybe we could do some sort of automation around this where we notify in the MR that, hey, your test has passed, the regression on staging has passed or failed. But at least there's some thought of it that, hey, let's check staging results when the MR that you're working on has like staging environment or workflow staging labeled. You are aware that tests are running and you can help, like everybody can help monitor the test results. That is something I think could be done while we're working on fully automated solutions and fully automated notifications. I'll take a pause there.
Yeah, I'm just being mindful of the time. We only have, well, we are basically at time, but we have 3 more minutes to go. Is it possible to not depend on humans here and consider having another level of QA tests? So we have smoke tests and the rest of the suite. Is it possible to have smoke tests and then reliably passing tests and then the rest of the suite as well, because I would rather plug in the deployment system into an automated system and have that hard aborts than depending on an on-call pager duty rotation that still depends on humans.
I believe that is something we're looking into, to adding another notation of reliable tests. And then that's like the next cohort that you can plug into. I can plug that into the rapid action. We're now working hard on, actually, we have only 6 flaky tests left total, and we're making great progress on it. I'll make sure that we tackle that from the quality side. And they have another level of cohort for you to select from.
All right. I guess we discussed why was this not caught by automated QA testing, and then mean time to detection, from detection to mitigation. What have we done there to improve it? I mean, from the timeline, it is 3 hours total from report to mitigation, which is not stellar, but also not completely problematic. Sorry, not problematic, but yeah, sorry, long day. I'm forgetting words now. So 3 hours it took us to go from a report to addressing it. Could have we done something to do it quicker?
Could I mention something?
Sure.
I think it depended. The fact that it wasn't very problematic might be heavily dependent on Stan jumping in and figuring it out. So we don't necessarily have a process to make sure that something like that happens. It was kind of dependent on a person.
That's a good point.
I'll say that, you know, one thing that I may be confusing this with another issue, but I seem to recall that we were coming out of a period where we had been delaying deploys, and so we had a lot of changes going in at once. That made it difficult to comprehend or narrow down where to look quickly to see what might have changed. So we were really heavily relying on Kibana and Sentry. And I'll say that, as I recall, Stan kind of narrowed in very quickly in Sentry as to where he felt the problem was. Kibana led me in a different direction that was not really the correct analysis of the problem as it was occurring. And I do think that with the dev escalation channel, it might have added some more time, but that if Stan hadn't jumped in, that would have been the next obvious step, was to get in there and get assistance from whoever was on call from the dev escalation channel to assist. And I also think that our behavior of raising this incident and it propagating out into Slack channels helped to bring that awareness in. And Stan just happened to be standing there, but I don't want to, and I'll be honest, I don't really remember when this happened, how the dev escalation channel, how set up it was, but I feel like that would be that surrogate for what Stan did, is that we would go right into that. So I felt confident about that I could get that help as the EOC to someone from dev to take a look at this and help where I didn't have that expertise.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I don't know that the mean time would have been so good, though, had Stan not been there. But that's a very good point. We have the process in place.
One thing that you mentioned, Cameron, there, and that was that deployment was delayed and we kind of accumulated changes. Theoretically, if we have had smaller deploy bundles, we could have theoretically caught it earlier. And we are driving in that direction, but we have a bit of a chicken and egg problem with, you know, depending on the test, but tests are not being reliable. Can we do it quicker? No, because we need to have a reliable test and so on.
I want to say in this case, Maren, it was not a normal bundle. This, I believe, was very large because we had stopped deploys for some reason for a longer than normal period. And so that, I'm not complaining about the current deploy schedule or the volume of each deploy. I'm just saying that this one seemed like, as I recalled, much larger. And so it made it very difficult to know what changes were in. It was overwhelming how many issues had been committed into that deploy.
All right.
So
That's
just
a good.
we're at time. You're all welcome to go over. I have to run to another meeting, but I just want to say this is one of the best RCAs we've done. So thanks, Maren, for organizing it and running it. This is really good. And I echo what Max said. A big part of this and maintaining the no blame culture is like the accountability and the transparency from Mateus, from Mike, and others that are part of this. That's really, really important. And I know it's a chicken and the egg sort of situation. Some people, and it's very human, might say, well, I'm hesitant to speak up because I'm worried about getting blamed. I promise you nothing increases the likelihood of blame than not speaking up and being accountable. But it's a chicken and the egg thing. So I just want to say, like, let's use this as an example, and hopefully it's a signal to people that are in future situations that it is okay to speak up. We are about no blame and we are about improvement. So great job. And that said, I've got to hop off. So thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, Eric is, as Eric is right, we are over time. But if others are willing, I'm willing to go over 5 minutes to kind of wrap it up. I'm seeing some nods and thumbs up. So folks who can't be here, feel free to head out. I want to address something that Cameron said before. Well, feel free to leave. We should consider making sure that any stoppage of deployment is considered as high severity, possibility for high severity issue. I know that it's a natural reaction when something happens to stop and back off, but this is exactly what happens with the large volume of changes that we have. If we slow down a bit, we will just introduce more changes that will have a possibility of like more angles of problems coming in. So what we should be doing is all of us, right? Development, ops, quality is making sure that the amount of changes that we have are small, but also the changes themselves being small. This is why iteration is also really valuable because you can actually submit 5-10 merge requests over the same thing, and us deploying 5-10 different merge requests over span of time is easier than one big thing that could cause an issue. So that's just a general comment there. All right, we have corrective actions written out. I'll encourage everyone to read them, and I will take another action item from me as a representative of the delivery team here, and that is look into why was the deployment bundle bigger this time according to Cameron. And then another thing is whether it's possible to safely increase the cadence of deployments while still depending on tests, like finding that middle ground where we feel comfortable from both quality and then infrastructure side of things as well. All right, big apology for going over time. I'm sorry. We'll do better next time, but I really appreciate everyone coming in and discussing these things. I think we have a lot of really good action items to take on. Thanks,
Maren,
everyone.
sorry.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Can you send us a recording as well, please? I want to propagate this
Yes,
to the rest of
of
the
course.
department. Awesome.
Yeah, of course.
Thanks,
Everyone.
everyone.
Thank you. Bye.